do this? Let's do this. What's up, NCS fam? My name is Newport, and this is my puppy, Louie. Say hi, Louie. I am a NCS artist that produces future bass and melodic bass, and a little bit of trap music as well. And I just released my new song, Touchdown with Mime, which is out on NCS right now. You can see it on YouTube, or you can click the link below and listen to it on any platform. Guys, I am so excited about this track. It was so much fun to make, and I'm really excited because today on NCS Arcade, I get to break it down with you guys. So we are going to get into how I made this track, a little bit about the inspiration behind it, and hopefully you learn something, or hopefully you just have fun with me while we talk about this song. So without further ado, I am going to let Louie go chill, and we are going to get into this. Let's go. Okay guys, so welcome into the project file of my track, Touchdown with Mime. This is it in its full glory. Yeah, I'm just gonna break down what I did in this track. So the track actually starts out pretty quiet. This was intentional. I kind of wanted to have a verse that was just like slowly building. First, let's take a listen to the whole verse, and then I'll break down how I built it. So here we go.
I've been thinking, lately it's just me against the world. Round and round I'm caught up in this swirl, trying to dig and trying to burrow. Pressure turned this stone into a pearl. Lessons that I learned weren't always thorough, sugar-coated like a churl. Now I'm really out here on my own. Now my homies acting like I owe 'em, done extending out my arm. Made a lot of money from my poems, been around it, now they say I'm on. I can finally say I'm up now, 20,000 on the...
Okay, so we'll stop there. So the verse actually starts pretty slow, and it actually just starts with two elements. It's this pad that I found right here. Without anything on it, it sounds like this. So it's kind of like really airy and you know, light and fluffy. And then I actually just wanted it to kind of like hover a little bit to give it some ambiguity, I guess. So I actually just threw an auto pan on there and automated it. That way it would kind of cut out every 16th note, and then EQ'd it a little bit, and we have this. Simple enough. And I also added in a piano, but I reversed it, so it sounds like this. And together we get this.
I've been thinking.
So pretty simple, straightforward, and then I just added in a 808 bass on the low end and EQ'd out the highs. And then for the drums, I like to experiment with drums a lot. I love using like loops and sample pack items and kind of messing around with them until I find something that I like. I started with this loop, and it was cool. Kind of ominous, but I wanted to add some delay. That way I would give it a little bit of flavor. And what's cool is that is a like a 6th note delay. So instead of it being, you know, the classic like 4/4 tempo, there's a little bit of rhythm manipulation there too. And then obviously we have the kicks, and that's pretty much it for there. Later in the verse, all I do is I add another gritty bass that sounds like this. And that has the same hovering effect that you saw on this, but I just automated it within Serum. And then we have another sub bass in here too. And I also threw in a top loop from a Cashmere pack to give us all of this together.
Girl, now I'm really out here on my own. Now
I forgot, I also added in a couple of extra claps just to, you know, beef up the second half of the verse as we enter the breakdown. I do want to talk quickly about effects because I think they're very important, and I want to tell you guys how I use them in most, if not all, of my tracks. Effects, so things like sweeps and risers and impacts, things like that. I generally don't use a lot of them, but I use them for a pointed reason. In my opinion, the best time, and really the only time you need to use risers, impacts, and effects like that is to kind of communicate a message that something is changing in the song. So I use these risers, this riser right here and this impact to signal, hey, the verse drums are coming in, like things are about to get like ramped up a notch a little bit. So listen closely for the impact here.
I've been thinking, lately it's just me.
So instead of just using them every 4 bars, every 8 bars, or trying to use some sort of formula, try to use it as a way to communicate, because while people aren't going to focus on it, it will beef up your instrumental ultimately. So the next section actually is the build-up. Mime switches over to the hook here, and there's a big kind of shift in the song, and we kind of bring everything back down. We just had a verse. Mime killed it on the rap, and now we're going into the build-up, which will lead us to the drop, and Mime hits us with this catchy hook. So this is what the instrumental sounds like. I'll block out the vocals, that way you can hear just the instrumental. Okay, we'll get to the drop in a second, but right here, it's very simple what I did. I just dropped out some of the verse elements. So I obviously took the sub bass out, and I also took out all of the drums, except for I do have a long fill from a Cashmere pack that's building up the drums. I didn't want to use too much. I didn't feel as though I needed to, because the hook carries these 8 bars. So I really wanted to let the hook breathe. So we really just have a low pass long fill that kind of slowly comes up, and as it's coming up, the highs are coming in, and that's all we needed. And then we have this fill right here, and those are the only drums. I took away the 808 bass here, and I just added a pluck chord. And what I was trying to do there is the drop also follows that pattern of the 16th note hovering, kind of like the intro pad does. So what I wanted to do is just kind of communicate that a little bit more. So I have this here to hold us in while we slowly fade in the drop elements. So you can slowly start to hear those come in right here. And then we also have that riser. Also, it's important to note here, we have this impact. And so that kind of really helps us communicate, like, okay, things are dropping out right now. And it kind of feels like everything drops out. And I think that impact really lays it home, because without it, it would all sound like this. Just sounds kind of empty, right? But see, we communicate something there. So let's listen to the second half of this build up, and then we'll listen to the drop, and then I'll break it down. So let's listen.
Up now, and I ain't never gonna touch down. I ain't never gonna touch down. No, I ain't never gonna touch down.
Okay, there's the drop in its entirety. So let's break it down. It's important to start with the drums here, because usually drums are kind of what's driving a drop. So what we have here is pretty simple, but I want to note that the fills, especially in this drop, really communicate transitions. We have a basic kick and snare pattern. It sounds altogether like this with the cymbals and everything. Pretty simple, straightforward. We just have a shaker loop that is kind of keeping the rhythm the whole time, kind of making it a chorus drum pattern instead of just a verse pattern. And then we have the kicks and a pretty hard hitting snare. And then we also have these fills that are happening every 2 bars or so. Really what these fills are doing is there's breaks in the chords that you can see. And when those breaks happen, we need to fill that space with something. So instead of just filling it with more chords or a melody, it's fun to sometimes switch it up and fill it with things like percussion or elements that people wouldn't really expect. So those fills, although they're consistent, it kind of drives the rhythm, and so subconsciously it's almost unexpected. The drums are pretty straightforward. The only thing that happens in the second half is that I add another hi-hat pattern to make things more interesting and add a little bit of beef. Let's hop into down here and we'll go over the driving melody, which is actually just a vocal chop that sounds like this. So for this vocal chop, I actually just went on Splice. Splice is a website I frequent all the time and found this vocal chop. It's from, I think, one of Kara's sample packs. Kara has so many cool vocal packs, and this is actually the one that she did with Heather Summer. Heather Summer is an incredible artist. Shout out to you, Heather, if you ever watch this. I don't know why you would, but if you do, let's collab. Yeah, so this is just a vocal sample that I found, and I pitched it up 8 semitones, so almost a full octave, and then I pitched it 4 semitones down here, making it an octave lower than the 8 semitones up. Ultimately, it made it in the key of the track because I had the chords laid out first. But what I liked about it is the fact that the vocals are so pitched up and down that you don't really hear what actually is being sung. You just kind of hear the notes that she's singing. So it kind of creates a cool element because while it's a vocal chop technically, you're not really paying attention to what she's saying. Really all I did for that, I added obviously some reverb, some delay, a little bit of EQ to take out the harsh parts, and that was it. The other thing that you see right below here is some sweeps, some instrumental sweeps. What those are doing is they're filling the gap that the chords and the bass create in these little crevices right there. The vocal chop is pretty consistent, but since it's consistent, we kind of need to switch things up a little bit with the chords. So what I ended up doing is I cut them out on the 4th bar of every measure and added these sweeps in to kind of fill the space. The next section that is obviously instrumental is the chords. Super Saws, huge fan. This is what my chords sound like isolated out. So pretty straightforward. We just have 2 serum patches here, and I made sure I actually started out with reverb on here, as you can see. And I ended up taking the reverb off because when the chords cut, I wanted them to cut completely. Pretty much just have these 2 super saws. I'll play them for you, isolated each one. That way you can hear what they sound like separated too. And then we have this one. So they sound unique when separated, but when together they kind of just create this big stack. Part of that is because they have different octaves. To beef up the chords a little bit, one thing I did do is I added these white noise elements down here. So isolated out, they just sound like this. What it does is it creates kind of a thickening layer of the chords. So let's listen to the chords, just the 2 of them. Now let's listen with the white noise. So it just helps to emphasize things a little bit. And I also put these reverse sweeps of the white noise in there too, just to help emphasize the reverse instrumental sweeps that are happening. The next part of this is the bass, which sounds like this altogether. Three bass patches here. Essentially what I did was I added a gritty bass, and that's kind of the driving bass. In my opinion, when you're stacking chords, it all needs to fit together perfectly. The gritty bass really has to work with the chords to gel it all together. This gritty bass right here is kind of driving things, and it matches the MIDI automation that I'm doing with the chords. Then we have these 2 other bass layers. It's just a mid bass layer that sounds like this. These these two basses might be kind of hard to hear if you're listening on like, Apple headphones or like a computer or something, but they're there, trust me. So that's like a mid bass that kind of adds in some lower layers, but then we have the low layer, which is the sub bass that sounds like this. And that's just a simple sine wave. The important thing to note is that the mid bass and the sub bass are not automated with the 16th note LFO that everything else is automated with. That is pretty much all we have to the drop. Oh, and then I forgot about these little lasers down here. Let's listen to those. Pretty sweet, right? Pretty much all those are just some freaking sweet lasers that I put in. And the purpose of putting them in was to make a cool transition, because as you can see, things kind of drop out right here. We don't really have any drums or anything like that. So I was like, well, before we take some stuff out, let's put something in. Lasers. So it sounds like this all together. No, I ain't never gonna touch them. Pretty sweet, right? And then the last thing that I did in the drop, besides add those cymbals that we talked about earlier to add a second half to the drop, is I also took the intro pad from the verse in the beginning, and I just put it up an octave and had it hover like it was in the beginning, so it sounds like this. So what that does is it kind of like keeps things moving, and it kind of sounds like things are like almost like taking off. So that is the drop right there, folks. That's all there is to it. As far as the rest of the song goes, the second verse is pretty similar. I do cut some elements out and do a couple of different things in the verse, but for the most part, it's the same as the first verse. And then the second drop, one thing that I do that I always suggest to producers to do is to make your second drop at least a little different. We want to have that chorus effect of the drop being something consistent that the listener can kind of say, okay, I know what's coming. But when the second drop doesn't start the same way as the first drop, then all of a sudden the listener's like, whoa, I didn't expect that. And it's sick. So what I did for the second drop was I cut out all of the percussion, kind of like I do for the second half of the drop, and all I have is that fill to lead us back in, and then I have this bass right here. I cut out the chords, and I actually kept the vocals in there because I just figured, we can't cut everything out. And so the second drop actually sounds like this. Now and I ain't never gonna touch down. And one thing of note is that this pad that kind of like hovers, the hovering pad, I did keep that in for the whole second drop because I figured that we kind of needed to, keep things moving a little bit more. So the way that I varied the second half of the second drop is I just had mime sing the hook one last time. The last thing that we really need to cover is actually vocal processing. As you can see here, there's tons of different layers and stuff. Really, all this is the verse. Mime killed it on the vocals. He provides very high quality vocals. Obviously, he's a killer. So it was really easy to mix these actually. All I had to end up doing was add a little OTT for some crispness on the highs, and to add a little bit of delay for an effect. And that was kind of all I needed to do with these vocals because they sounded great when I got them. I did actually beef up the hook a little bit. Here's the hook in its entirety with all of its different elements.
Come on, I can finally say I'm up now. 20,000 on a bus down. I'm on my way up, going up now.
So there are a couple of different elements there. The reason for that is I kind of wanted it to sound like a chorus was singing it, to the point where it felt like, there's a lot of power behind this. What I did was I had the original vocal that he sang. All I did was throw some auto-tune on there, some OTT, and a little bit of reverb. And then I have a lower octave where I bumped it down an octave with Sound Shifter, and then the normal processing. And I cut out a little bit of the highs because it's an octave lower, so we don't really need those highs because they're being sang here. Then these last two layers, I added a little bit of, a little bit of spice, and basically they sound like this isolated.
I can finally say I'm up now. 20,000 on a bus now.
So a little bit of formant shifting there in vocal synth 2, as well as some vocoding. So that's pretty much all that is. And then with this last one, I kind of did a similar thing, but I formant shifted in the other direction and kind of made it sound a little bit more computerized. So that's pretty much all I did. And when you have all of those elements together, it sounds like this.
Finally say I'm up now, 20,000 on a bus down.
So that's pretty much it, guys. That concludes the breakdown of my track Touchdown with Mime. It is out on NCS right now, so go listen to it on your favorite platform, whether that's here on YouTube or if it's on Spotify, Apple Music. It's out everywhere, so go check it out and tell me what you think. Follow me on Instagram at Newport Music. And follow me on TikTok as well. I'm doing production stuff on there too now. All right, guys, so that concludes the breakdown of my track Touchdown with Mime. It's out everywhere on NCS right now, so go check it out, whether it's here on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Music. It's everywhere. Go listen. I had a ton of fun here today breaking down my track with you guys. I hope you learned something, or I hope you got to know me a little better, or my production style a little bit better. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, then please go subscribe to me on YouTube right now. My channel name is just Newport. I'm doing stuff like this all the time, and we have tons of fun on my channel, whether it's remix challenges, producer challenges, breaking down my tracks, or just eating a lot of good food. One time I literally made Olive Garden breadsticks and remixed it. So go subscribe to my channel for that kind of content if you like it. Also, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Newport Music. I am doing production stuff on there all the time, and also you can get all the latest info from me about when I'm releasing music, when I'm uploading new YouTube videos. Thank you so much to NCS Arcade for having me on this channel. It was a lot of fun to break down my track with you guys, and grateful to the NCS team for all they do for artists like me. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to NCS Arcade. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Newport, and I had a ton of fun here today, and I hope you did too. See you guys on my channel. Peace.